You can now watch Core TV News live from anywhere in the world on our website www.coretvnews.com. Click on Live TV on our website and watch us live.
And welcome to Core TV Primetime News.
To follow us on Twitter, click on Twitter icon on our website. On Facebook, click on the Facebook and YouTube to see all our previous news production. You can also watch us live on YouTube. Click Core TV, leave a space, then News. Core TV News, a 24-hour news station.
On the day list this morning, Nigerians encourage corruption, cites June 1st of the Punch newspaper. And Nigerian governor forum calls for Okonjo Iweala's resignation. Page 2 of the Punch newspaper. The dailies every day on Core TV News.
Welcome back. You caught me there. Well, I'm joined to review the newspapers this morning by GBOLA OBA, an entrepreneur as well as a public affairs analyst. I understand, sir, that you spent most of your morning in traffic. Is it not amazing, really, that during the electioneering in Lagos, not quite mention was made as regards how to solve the traffic congestion in Lagos?
To be very honest with you, one is also particularly concerned that the last electioneering campaigns in Lagos was quite devoid of qualitative existential issues relating to Lagos. You know, the electioneering isn't condescended to the level of brickbat accusations, somebody wanting to sell us to the Igbo, somebody wanting to, you know, all those stuffs. Important issues. How could a city as big as Lagos, one of the biggest, one of the most populous cities on the face of the earth, be in existence and not have a metro system? It's preposterous.
What's his name now? Governor Fashola's administration is working on a light rail. Do you see that?
It's working on one, but it's not finished yet. You know, it's been done up to a very commendable level, but the reality is it's not finished yet. You see, I lived in a number of cities, you know, before in my life that you wouldn't need to. Sometimes you wouldn't need to take your car out because it's easier, faster to go by the public transport network.
When the BRT came out, it was a laudable innovation. One would have thought that would have also eased the traffic out, but what happened over time?
The BRT is a commendable idea, but it is a bantamweight boxer punching or caught up in the ring with a heavyweight problem. You know, the BRT is at best where Lagos is now, a micro intervention. What is called a micro intervention? Something that you do, but something that you do to address a problem, but which in itself, although efficacious, but in itself does not have the potency to reduce the inimical nature of the problem to something that would almost seem totally solved. So the BRT is a good idea. To be honest with you, it's working well. But where Lagos is now, it is just but a bantamweight boxer trading punches with a very humongous this thing. So,
have you really been able to identify what should be done at this time, especially for the incoming administration?
We don't really need to reinvent the wheel. Solutions are all over the world, practically poking their fingers at our eyes. You know, London is a very cosmopolitan, very sprawling, very populated city. you know, the public transport network is one of the best in the world. I lived there. I lived for years, you know. Apart from London, cities like Cairo, there's an equivalent conurbation in Africa. You know, public transport. Ironically, it was General Muhammadu Buhari who, just about when Cairo's metro line was being built, Jakonde also, then Governor Jakonde, was also putting up a metro system in Lagos about the same time that Cairo's metro system was being built. Ironically, it was Buhari who came into power through as a military head of state then that cut short that experimentation. I think it behoves him now to make sure that a positive attention is given to the gridlock that defines Lagos traffic.
On a lighter note, I saw a video on Facebook this morning, and there was a research being done as regards to what really is the cause of the traffic in Lagos, and someone came up with the idea that it has to be witchcraft, because I've found out that you stay in traffic for hours and then you just get to a point that you can't really find out what caused the traffic, and the fact that traffic also has become a business avenue for many Lagosians. You see people stand, you know, right at the middle of the street selling soft drinks, selling some other soft items to passers-by. Well, we're hopeful that things will get better. Let's turn our attention very quickly to the newspapers this morning as we do some news review and find out what stories are making headline. We have The Guardian, The Vanguard, as well as The Punch newspaper. Let's start with The Guardian. Protesters threaten South African interests in Nigeria. Victims may be compensated, says government. You also see an interesting front page picture here. They call it the Great Trek. From Lagos, Hashim Sulaiman's 3-week Great Trek for Buhari's victory ended in Abuja yesterday amid jubilation. FG allays fears over strange ailment in Ondo. WHO denies attributing outbreak to pesticides. Senate may pass constitutional review bill into law. That's on page 3. Gunmen killed 11 in Rivers, Taraba. Page 4 of The Guardian. And council rates Unilorin law students best in 2014 bar final exams. Oyedepo contest court jurisdiction and suit over 9 billion naira deal. That's on page 3. Half-Basig's probe of Delta NBA chief's murder. That's on page 3 as well. And Jonathan's action saved Nigeria, Africa from crisis, says Ouattara. That's on page 5. Let's start with the xenophobic attack in South Africa. I spoke with a Nigerian student, a PhD student, who lives in, where is that? I think East London in South Africa, on the show yesterday. And what he said is they are living in fear, you know, given the news that you're hearing all around. But would you say that we are reacting to it properly in Nigeria? Because we've had a couple of protests. Many people have gone to MTN, they've gone to ShopRite. They're saying we're going to shut down South African businesses just the way they have done to us.
In the short term, we are reacting to it as human beings would react ordinarily to issues such as dastardly, disturbing, pernicious, indeed, perverted occurrences like what is happening in South Africa. It's very unfortunate that one of the leading economies on the continent of Africa, due to the failure of leadership in that country, has reduced 25% of its population to a very frustrating economic circumstance that they think they have no option but to ventilate their anger against foreigners that they believe are taking opportunities from them. One thing I know for sure is that when leadership fail and when human beings are left in the circumstance where they think that their economic condition can no longer be bettered by their efforts easily, or when human beings believe that their commercial opportunities have been somewhat beclouded, they tend to want to see other people, especially when the people who seem to be the victims of such a circumstance are the aboriginals. They tend to want to see those who are immigrants, those who are different from them, either by the very nature of their color, or the very nature of their culture, or the very nature of their physiology. They tend to want to see them as the scapegoat, people who bring in. These are the people who are causing our problem. Fundamentally, what is wrong in South Africa is that a lot of South African youngsters, many of them who fall into that 25% bracket of their population who are unemployed, many of them do not have marketable skills. Many of them, due to the apartheid phenomenon that they experienced for so long, many of them were denied formal education and training. And many of those who were denied formal education and training have also been bearing children now. And most of their children are not doing any better because from the installation of democracy in South Africa, the Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki to Zuma, the administrations have not done well enough to address fundamental issues of education and training, of entrepreneurial empowerment, of their legislations, but they are not well effective. About 95% of South African-owned businesses are owned by whites and other colored people except black people. They have pockets of, like the incumbent vice president, they have pockets of black people who are billionaires in dollars, but let's be very honest with ourselves. Those were people who made money from rentierism because they were members or because they are members of the ANC. White companies or white entrepreneurs or businesses, foreign direct investors coming to South Africa picked them to use them as the face of their businesses. They became billionaires, but the riches is not quite percolating down the distance. That is why today's vice president in South Africa is one of the richest Africans living, and is a board member of a number of mining companies, but in the same mining companies.
Where we saw
in the same mining companies, a lot of South African blacks are working in conditions barely better than what used to prevail under apartheid.
I understand the gap that exists between.
But you see, I must say emphatically, I must say without any iota of equivocation, that what is happening in South Africa is unfortunate, is bad, is going to be very, 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 the concomitant effect of it will be very, very negative for the South African economy. They will ultimately regret what they are doing, but you know what? I cannot sit here and tell you when in Nigeria 4 days ago in the Agatu local government area of Benue State, 60 lives were lost because 2 villages were fighting over a fishing pond. 60 human lives were lost. Not up to 60 people have been killed not up to 60.
Even the 2011, 2012 xenophobic attack that was widely reported, just about 60 people.
Look at what happened about 3 or 4 days ago in Kogi State. Because of a strip of farmland, 2 villages, 6 lives were lost. The incident in Agatu local government area of Benue State, like I just alluded to, apart from the loss of 60 human lives, property were vandalized, arson and utter vandalism were committed. When people find themselves in economically extenuating circumstances, you see, as human beings, and I've lived in other countries before, I've been a victim, when I had a job or when I seemed to have an enterprise running well. I've lived in Europe where you think people are more advanced, more forward-looking, more exposed. In economically dire situations or in recessions, immigrants get to have the Aborigines, falsely accusing them of taking opportunities away from them, and sometimes going xenophobic.
You're saying it's not limited to whether you're black or white.
It's not limited to whether you are black or white. It's a common human phenomenon that good leadership tend to anticipate, thereby putting policies and measures in place that will empower the people, so that, you see, when people are gainfully employed, when people have marketable skills, when people have enterprises that are prospering, they tend to see foreigners as an addition, an expansion of their market. You understand what I'm saying? But when you feel you have been outdone by, there are no opportunities for you where you live. The people who are in leadership in your country have failed you. You will just think, even they have so failed us that foreigners are now even coming here to ride roughshod over us. But you see, the irony is that my study of 6,000 years of human civilization and governance tells me that no society prospers sustainably without
the
having
contribution
an
of foreigners.
inclusive policy that engages all the sectors of society, minorities, women, immigrants, because all these people, when they come together, especially where there is good governance, societies are bettered.
And then they get to flourish. I understand exactly what you're saying. For instance, MTN representative in Edo State yesterday clearly stated that 99% of the employees of MTN are Nigerians, and that if that telecommunication company gets to shut down, it will have adverse effect on hundreds of thousands of Nigerians who are directly or indirectly, attached to their employees. But we can give economic reasons for what's happening in South Africa. Are we also considering the fact that worse things might have happened in other parts of Africa, but that didn't result in such barbaric acts? I recall the Ghana Must Go experience in Nigeria. I'm not sure it deteriorated this bad, because there still exists a sharp difference between the rich and the poor, even in Nigeria.
Let's be very, you see, when we're making allusions, we must trade on facts, and we must make sure the Ghanaian government was the first to send Nigerians out of Ghana. You may not know that historically, it was the Ghanaian government who first sent out Nigerian illegal immigrants out of Ghana. Nigeria, this was, the Ghanaians did theirs under General, is it Africa or whatever. During the Shagari era, because the government was bereft of good judgment, and because the government was also bereft of good economic policies and good economic ideas, people resort to that when they are bereft of good economic ideas. Because the government was bereft of good judgment and bereft of good economic ideas, they thought one of the ways through which they could alleviate the living conditions of Nigerians was to send away Ghanaian illegal immigrants. It was a form of reciprocation that came from this thing. Look, everywhere in the world, like I said earlier on, when the Aborigines feel economically frustrated and castrated, it was the good judgment of the OBA of Lagos and the Lagos state government about 2 years ago. People who own, Nigerians who own stores, especially Yorubas, who own stores in the commercial art of Lagos, severally went to the Oba's palace to complain about the fact that Chinese merchants in the trading zone of Lagos were undercutting them by bringing in substandard articles and products, the same article that they would go to China to buy at a relatively expensive rate, that Chinese people would go there, bring in substandard version at a cheaper rate and undercut the market here. You want me to shock you, my brother? In Great Britain, I was listening to the leader of opposition in Great Britain. You know, they are having their electioneering campaigns now for their May general elections. I was listening to the leader of the Labour Party about 3 days ago, and you know, one of the policies he promised to make sure gets to become law when he becomes prime minister. He says that when he becomes prime minister, or if Labour wins the elections, that they will make sure that they will legislate that no immigrant, they will make sure that they legislate that no employer of Labour would employ immigrants and pay them below the industry rate, thereby undercutting the employment opportunities for Britons. That also became an electioneering campaign issue. In United Kingdom, my brother, people who find themselves in a circumstance, as I'm talking to you now, 25% of South Africans of employment age are unemployed. And experience tells me, having lived in the Northern Hemisphere, 2 countries in Europe, Germany and United Kingdom, experience tells me that when you have such a high unemployment rate, those who are naturally affected the most are blacks and youths. Between these 2 segments of society, who ordinarily get inflicted the most with high rate of unemployment, you have two combustible segments of society that at the snap of the finger, ill-educated black people and the younger people. In the case of South Africa, in fact, high number of black youths and ill-educated South Africans. My brother, I think we can rightly condemn xenophobia and the unfortunate scenes we are seeing of seeing human lives literally being taken, or human beings being set ablaze, or property being vandalized, and people being victimized. We rightly should condemn that, but it behoves us too to make sure that we encourage the South African governments to do the right thing for their people.
That's right.
And indeed also tell our government the situation of having more than 1,000 Nigerians every week go apply for asylum in South Africa is not only preposterous, it is an indictment of the failure of our government. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan may not be my ideal president of Nigeria, but at least I know for fact for a fact that under his tenure, no single political prisoner I can easily mention his or her name in Nigeria. There is no single political prisoner I can easily mention his or her name in this country. And yet, you have about 1,000 plus Nigerians every week applying for political asylum in South Africa to have residency.
Right.
So fundamentally, we should also tackle the issue of youth unemployment in Nigeria, training, skills acquisition, enterprise empowerment of our youth, because it is disgraceful that people will be leaving the biggest market in a region of the world for the second biggest market because they believe that the opportunities are better for them in the second biggest market relative to the biggest market.
They say power is also another major issue here. So, we're hopeful that things get better. Yesterday, the Zulu King, who allegedly was said to have made certain statements that inspired the attacks, also came out publicly to denounce that and say that probably was misunderstood and has asked that the attacks should end. We're hopeful that with the efforts of the international community,
ironically, one of his wives is a foreigner. So if he loves a foreign, he should also know that if he loves foreign food, you cannot be Solomonic in one respect and be unwise in another respect.
Let's move ahead very quickly and find out what the top stories are on the front page of the Punch this morning. PDP may expel party chiefs over Jonathan's defeat. NEC and WC members likely to be affected. You find details of that on page 2. The front page picture here also show some Nigerians protesting at MTN, multi-choice, ShopRite offices, outlets. That's on page 9 of the Punch newspaper. FAC raises panel over NNPC's unremitted $1.48 billion. That's on page 31. 20 killed in Taraba, Bayelsa, Rivers. Pages 3, 5, and 7. Court decides Oyedepo stockbrokers $1.8 billion naira suit, May 27. You get details of that on page 12. Fire supporters lay siege to Ekiti Assembly. Schools fail to resume. You find details of that on page 2 of the Punch. Let's quickly touch on the stories from the PDP. Yesterday, the chairman said he wasn't going to resign irrespective of the challenges that the party was facing, and was asking those who are calling on the National Working Committee members to resign to also shift their sword, that he was going to stay with the PDP no matter what happens. Would you say, or let me ask you, what your thoughts are as regards this call for the resignation of these people?
We are treading on a virgin path. Experimentally, we are treading on a virgin path. Usually in most advanced democracies, when your party loses an election such as PDP has lost massively across the country, strategic chieftains of the party generally just throw in the towel because they want to give others the opportunity to come and reinvigorate the party, recalibrate, the play of ideas, and see how the party can get out of the morass it finds itself. That is usually the tradition. Most times people do it voluntarily. It's like a typical football manager. When your team loses big, it is just traditional, except your name is Keshi. It is just traditional that you resign and walk away from it. But if your name is Keshi and you are Nigerian and you know somebody in the presidency who can help you fire the the Director General of the Sports Commission because you are not renewing your contract on time before the president's tenure ends, you don't resign. So normally, in other respectable jurisdictions, people walk away and allow other people with new ideas to come populate the strategic room, strategy room of the party and re-enliven the party. But in Nigeria, we will see what we form as a tradition. But I just gave you an example, jokingly, from another parallel industry. We have a coach now who lost ignominiously. Couldn't even take us to the competition that he won the year before. We couldn't even partake in it. And he has the temerity because man, no man, is said to be the favored one of the president and his wife. At a point, because some people in the sports commission are not, they want to follow the global tradition. It does seem now that the DG of the sports commission has lost his job. He's been replaced now. And today, this afternoon, Kechi will be signing a new contract, as a reappointed Nigerian coach. So we can only sit down and look and see how this plays out in the PDP. But we know how it is done, at least in relatively advanced societies where this is all about ideas that work, not about personalities.
I see. Let's take the front page of the Vanguard very quickly. Impeachment. Fear grips Ekiti as schools offices remain short. We found details of that on page 11. Xenophobic attacks. Protesters target South African business outfits as youths protest at South African High Commission in Abuja. MTN office threatened to shut down ShopRite, MultiChoice, MTN nationwide. Envoy apologizes, says 84 suspects arrested in South Africa. Serap urges federal government to drag South Africa to African Commission. The front page picture tells the story. Jonathan, Buhari, Atiku, Ngige, others eulogize Chiku Merije. That's on page 16 of the Vanguard newspaper. Let's quickly touch on Ekiti before we leave the papers this morning. They say people are no longer willing to step out of their houses. Schools shut down. One would have thought that when Fayose came out to apologize and extended an olive branch, that the 19 APC lawmakers should have followed. Are you thinking along that line?
It behoves the leaders of thought in Ekiti to intervene in this issue. And in analyzing this issue, I want to make known my personal preferences, and also separate my personal preferences from the abrasive phase of the law. I would rather that Ekiti leaders of thought find a way of intervening to let a political situation or a political resolution be found between Fayose and the Ekiti 17. Not because I love Fayose. He's a cantankerous character, very manipulative human being who ordinarily, let's be very honest with ourselves, I think is his own worst enemy. But I would rather that the Ekiti leaders of thought intervene to articulate a political situation, a political solution that would allow Fayose not to be impeached. But if you ask me, as a Nigerian who respects or who would rather like to function in a country where the rule of law is entrenched, if you asked me, as Fayose committed enough impeachable offenses, I'll say more than enough. Fayose Fayose orchestrated a coup d'etat in the Ekiti legislature by making sure that 7 legislators usurped the powers of the 26th House legislature against the wishes of 19 members. Fayose orchestrated a melodramatic supposed impeachment of the Speaker of the House of Assembly when the Speaker still had and still has the support of the majority members of the legislature. Fayose, against the rule of the Ekiti House of Assembly, encouraged 7 members to approve his appointment of commissioners against the dictate of the law. Fayose went ahead to have a budget passed, appropriation bill passed by 7 members of the legislature against the wishes of the majority 19 of the legislature. Fayose had the temerity to not only do all these inimical conducts against the constitution, but he practically and literally ran opposition members out of town. He ran them out of the state. Now, in the circumstance that the Ekiti 19 now find themselves, Fayose is now also resorting to an illegality to protect his own tenure. You see, if I were one of the members of the Ekiti 19, ordinarily, and I'm talking the law here because the law sometimes is different from, politics. We would make sure that every day we surreptitiously record all the legal activities of Fayose to inhibit us from getting access to the chamber of the legislature, and I will tell them to run a parallel this thing to impeach him, because Fayose is trying to catch in on a pronouncement of court that says, on the pronouncement of the Supreme Court in the case of Peter Obi in Anambra, which was reiterated in the case of Ladoja, that the business of the chamber must be done in the chamber, and that impeachment processes done outside the chamber of the legislatures will not be allowed to stand in law. Now, in wanting to benefit from an extant law through a mischief, we will also subject him, because I am one radical for the law sometimes, I will also make sure that we go ahead with the impeachment and let him go and litigate, and when we get to the courts, even up to Supreme Court, we will just be arguing, can our court allow a man to materially benefit from his own mischief? That would be my argument. But you know what? Like I said earlier on, my personal preference, because I used to know him, I used to be very close to him, because I know his foibles, my personal preference would be Ekiti leaders of thought get involved to resolve this, with a political mechanism than the total asphyxiation that it is causing commerce and normal existence now in the state.
Let's take a while to look beyond Fayose and Ekiti State, because we might also be quick to forget the reality of the relationship that do exist between the executive and the State House of Assembly. For instance, in Edo State, there was a time that there were 2 different sittings. One was at the Anthony Enaro complex, which was traditionally known to be the State House of Assembly complex. The other one was taking place somewhere in the government house, you know, giving excuse that the Anthony Enaro complex was under construction or under renovation, so to speak.
You can also
for
go
a
to
long
River
time.
State. You can go to River State.
There are many examples like that.
But
Let's look beyond Fire for a while.
No, I'm coming. You know, when you make examples, we must also accentuate the similarities and the differences. In the cases of Rivers, and in the cases of Rivers and Edo, the majority of the members of the houses of assembly align with the governor. In the cases of Rivers and Edo, Fayose is now building on the bad precedent of Governor Gbenga Daniel when he was governor of Ogun State. It's the second tenure of Gbenga Daniel when he was governor of Ogun State, in which he deliberately helped the minority members of the state legislature to overtake the activities of the legislature at the expense of the majority members of the state legislature. And to be very honest with you, Otumba Gbenga Daniel, a man for whom I have a lot of respect, is still getting his comeuppance till today. You see, it is a total travesty of democratic practice.
But whether majority or not, the question here is, how do we reenact?
I don't like a question. No.
The rule
Whether
of law.
majority.
No.
When you say whether, my brother, with due respect, when you say whether majority or not, you are basically telling me that.
You seem to be giving excuses for the places where the majority aligned with the executive, even though they did not follow the rule of law.
No.
Because the excuse for a while now has been, if you are wrong, to go to court. And God knows that you can spend eternity in court without getting justice.
You are missing issues here. And you are turning principles of democracy, you are turning them on their heads. My brother,
how exactly
with due respect, sir. My brother, in the presidential and parliamentary system of government, the majority members of any legislative chamber will define the direction of that chamber,
including giving them the power to break the mace on another person's head. You don't seem to understand what I'm saying.
Well, my brother, I'm coming, sir. I'm coming. Okay. You don't seem to understand what you're saying. I have understood you. No, with due respect, sir. Look, when a man breaks the mace on the head of another man,
and because it belongs to the majority,
my brother,
the rule of law exists.
When a man breaks the mace on the head of another man, there are prosecuting agencies, there are law enforcement agencies. The police can arrest him. The Directorate of Public Prosecution should prosecute him. Criminality, my brother, nobody is encouraging criminality.
Just a minute, Bolaban. Let me take a while to open the phone line. Hello, good morning. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Mr. Ostino.
Where are you calling from, Mr. Ostino?
I'm calling from Mogijo.
Please go ahead with your contribution.
Hello?
Go ahead with your contribution, please.
Please, the issue of Ekiti State, please let them allow sleeping dogs to lie. What we need in this country is peace, and nothing but peace. If you want to follow politicians, I'm sorry, I'm not a politician, but politicians, they are just like women. There's no time they are private partners, but private parts doesn't smell. They are accusing the PDP, and PDP they are accusing them. That was best of self-better. But at the end of the day, the poor masses will suffer it. Look at the children that are supposed to be in classroom today. They are nowhere to be found in the classroom. Fayose has been loved by his people, which his people have demonstrated. Let them forget about this is from what they call it, PDP or APC. But think for the future of the indigenous people of the Ekiti State. Think for the peace that will be in the Ekiti State. Think for the progress that will be in the Ekiti State. There is an adage that says, divided we fall, united we stand. What the APC, according to news, is trying to do that when they beautify your shade, the deputy will take over according to the constitution. Then the deputy now, that's because the governor will become to APC. Then the APC will be in control of the state. But let them forget all about this. That is the secret of what is happening in the state. Let them forget all about APC is ruling the whole nation, PDP is not ruling the whole nation. There is some parties, some candidates that have contested in this election that have good agenda, good see. But this man-no-man, party issue is trying to tear the country apart. But I know that one day God will bring his Messiah and this country will move forward. Every state will move forward. You and I will move forward. My own main point is that peace, let there be peace. Anywhere there is peace, there is love. Thank you.
Osino, thank you very much for your contribution on the show today. We have to wrap up this segment. I recall that prior to the gubernatorial and House of Assembly election, you were here. Just a minute.
Let me say something regarding Ostino's remark.
Okay.
Ostino says politicians, they are like women. That is an insult to half of the population of Nigeria. And many women are far more intelligent than many men. Many women out there are far more intelligent than many men. I don't like to encourage, I don't like when our men, when we talk like that anymore. Those are sentences meant for our parents in the 60s and 70s. Most of our women now are employers of labor. They are adding value to society. That is one. Two is your own case of conflating issues of criminality.
Just hold on. Please just hold on, Bulaba. We have to wrap up this segment. Okay, and sir. I want us to have a logical conclusion.
Okay, sir.
What kind of relationship should exist between the executive and the legislature within the confines of the law, given the many experiences that we've had in the past in Nigeria?
Ordinarily, the relationship that should exist between the executive arm of government and the legislative arm of government, be the two be controlled by the same party, or be the two be controlled by different parties, from whence we borrowed this constitution, as it is presently in America. Obama is a democratic president, and the Congress, the two chambers of the Congress, House of Representatives and this thing, and the Senate, are under the Republican Party, but yet they are trading the battles of ideas. If you think this is the way we can add value to the highest number of our citizenry, I will come and tell you, you know what, Mr. Governor, you may have a direct mandate from our electorate, but the total sum of our own mandates too in this chamber is a mandate of our electorate, believing that we can best represent them. Mr. Governor, what you want to do, we believe this and this and this are the inherent this thing. Do it this way because majority of our people will be blessed. Ordinarily, that is the ideal circumstance. In Nigeria, we know that the two parties, or one has to be a bit fair to APC because APC is just a contraption born out of the conduct of some legacy parties. We know that the two parties and politicians essentially tend to think more about themselves, tend to want to burnish their own ego, tend to want to, line their own pockets, and so what should be the ideal is frustrated for a very disturbing realpolitik as we see play out now. But even at then, Ekiti, relative to this madness that I have defined, is an ultra malady. And there are some dramatic personae. And Fayose, I said earlier on that my preference would be that the Ekiti leaders of thought would intervene for a political solution. But no, there is nobody who can critically and academically look at the problems of Ekiti and not say Fayose is the one that he must sober up. When God blesses you, you see, some conducts or some behavioral and some behavioral characteristics that helped you to climb the rock, you must know to leave them when you are at the zenith of the mountain, because if you hold on to those behavioral characteristics, they may tip you over and fall you down.
Well, Oba, thank you very much for finding time to come. Entrepreneur, public affairs analyst. It's always a dramatic experience having you on the show. Thank you for coming.
You want to run your mouth, Abi?
We'll take a break now, a commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk more on issues arising, especially talking about expectations of the incoming administration, the issues and the controversies. Don't go away.
Introducing Smart Connect, where get plenty awoof to allow you talk, text, and browse nyafu for tin in the money.
Igwe. Say you know say with just 200 naira recharge card, Airtel they summer me with 200% bonus to yarn more with any network.
Now you not call me your fiance.
Relax. In fact, I don't buy your own address every day. As correct vessel, anytime I recharge 200 naira and above, Smart Connect they suffer me with free internet to browse. If you want to make your family follow you enjoy, buy your 4-in-1 family pack for the price of one. Oh baby.
Akururu. This girl too, na family and friends.
No carry last though. Buy your Airtel SIM today.
Airtel, the smartphone network.